Hey everybody, welcome back to Unlocking the Paradigm Portal. My name is Sarah, and tonight I am back to talk about yet another duality, and this one is probably the most complex of the ones that I've talked about so far, and it's the one that we all struggle with in silence, and that is surrender versus control. So to begin with, this isn't that same kind of neat-ish spectrum as the other dualities, where surrender is the obvious good side and control is the obvious bad side. So both have a shadow side. And if you've listened to previous episodes, I've talked about the shadows. And I want to get into this one really in depth because they both also have a tremendous amount of wisdom to share if you're willing and able to recognize when you are in a state of surrender, when are you in control, and is it from the healthy side or the shadow side? Because they're both basically created from this raw material, so to speak, of our childhoods and the stories that we learned and that our bodies learned and our nervous systems believe. So tonight I'm going to change it up and switch from talking about the more positive end of the spectrum, and we're going to start with control. So control, and this might sound weird, control is seductive because it really promises us that we're going to have like order in the chaos. And it gives this illusion of safety and certainty that if we just hold on tight enough, that we will be safe from loss or pain or shame. But is that really true? It really is just the urge to have all the answers, to map out every outcome, and to try to orchestrate. And really that's what it is. You're trying to, like a puppeteer, control your own actions, but also the reactions and sometimes actions of everyone around you. And control might end up appearing as like perfectionism. And I know I've struggled very, very hard with that throughout my life. Over planning, relentless productivity. I mean, how many times have you been like, I can't relax because I haven't done enough today? Screw that. Or the subtle, and sometimes it's not so subtle, withdrawal from anything unpredictable. We all know somebody, or we are that person who doesn't want to try new things because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. That is a form of control. But underneath all of this, control is really born from old wounding. And maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were like landmines and you were tiptoeing and you never knew when something was going to blow. Or maybe there was a time that you trusted someone and you got really hurt, or you were abandoned, or the person minimized you, dismissed you, made you feel invisible. I mean, control is like grown-up armor that we weld together from like broken promises in childhood and in experiences throughout life. And it's like this voice that whispers in your mind or sometimes shouts that if you don't hold it all together, it will all fall apart. And if you let go, who is going to catch you? I know I've struggled with that one. And then it turns into hyper independence. That's another form of control. And control isn't always that obvious or that loud. And sometimes it's this like icy silence of being really self-contained and holding yourself together. You're in control of the smile that never drops and this endless to-do list that keeps you from feeling what you really would rather not feel. It keeps you busy. It keeps you running. It keeps you distracted. And control really shrinks your life to the size of what can be managed. And it's never quite enough. It's like an endless game of trying to cram all the little pieces in so it fits in the box. And when you really think about it, it's a story that is kind of written by survival. And going back to that armor reference, because I keep getting that image in my head, it's like the armor that we forge in situations like your childhood bedroom or your relationships or the workplace where certainty was scarce, and it's a shield that you build from 1,000 moments where the world felt too big, too chaotic, too unsafe. So we grip really tightly to the plans and the outcomes and micromanaging the chaos and striving so hard for perfection, not because we're power hungry, but because somewhere inside there is that other version of us, that younger version, that more open and free version that is still scanning for the next storm to hit. And control is really how we learn to carve out a little island of safety, just a little respite in this sea of unpredictability. And it's how we made sense of a world that rarely makes sense. And we see that a lot these days. Things just do not make sense. And in its shadow side, control becomes rigidity. It's a refusal to allow life to just surprise us. And it becomes exhausting because you are constantly hypervigilant against this possibility of loss or pain. And then what once was a protection really ends up becoming your captor. And it keeps you trapped, locked inside of these routines and these rules that really are ultimately suffocating the very feeling of being alive, which is, feeling that exposure and that freedom and that limitlessness. That is what we're here to do. But it's freaking terrifying. Don't get me wrong. So on the flip side of it, now we're going to get into surrender. And surrender is so much more complex. You hear people say like, oh, just let it go. Cool. Do you have a manual? How does one do that? But there's more to surrender than just letting go. And it often can be misunderstood as like a weakness or passivity or giving up. And a lot of people refuse to surrender in any aspect because it feels like giving up. But really, true surrender is, like I said, it's wild, it's free, it's courageous. And with it comes this willingness to just let go of any outcome and to let life flow. And I'm sorry if you hear cats fighting in the background. I can't help it. They won't leave me alone. So it's this willingness to really like let life flow where it wants to. And I keep getting this image of like a trust fall. And there's this one tarot card in particular from a deck where the woman is on a cliff and she is just in this flowing dress and she's falling backwards. And it's for the Fool card. And it's all about surrender and just going with whatever comes. But it can be terrifying when you grew up knowing that letting go meant potentially losing everything. And it can trigger some old ghosts. And it can trigger your fear of abandonment or any memories of chaos. However, when surrender finally arrives, I will say it feels like you've been in this long drought and the rain finally came. And it's a dissolving of tension. It's this sudden spaciousness, this sense of relief, like you can just take a deep breath. And going back to that armor imagery, the image that I'm getting right now is being surrounded by armor and a crack forms, and then the sunlight begins to pour through. And really, it's that moment that you stop forcing and you start listening and allow yourself to be changed by something much bigger than your will. But here's the shadow, because there's always a shadow. Surrender without discernment. Note, go back and watch the one from last night about discernment, or listen to it. Surrender without discernment can really become collapse. It can turn into a learned helplessness or a resignation. It can become what I refer to as like covert victim or martyr. I'm going to do a video on that sometime too. And sometimes what we call letting go is just another mask for giving up. Because true surrender is an active process. It is a conscious releasing. It's a participation with life as it is, not as you demand it to be. And it's an intentional choice to move into flow over restriction. It takes conscious awareness and effort. It is not easy, or at least we think it's not easy. Once you do it, it actually becomes tremendously easy. And sometimes surrender is not about this deep, soulful letting go. And actually, pause for 1 second. I have to let a cat out. Okay, sorry about that. The meowing was driving me nuts. So, okay, where was I? Surrender, letting go. So it's not just about letting go. Sometimes it is, again, that survival instinct that is like written on your bones. And if you grew up in like the eye of the storm, in the chaos, or under this heavy weight of unpredictable power, then surrender became this way to stay safe. It was like a magic, a kind of quiet magic, so to speak, that let you disappear or appease or dissolve when standing your ground would have cost way too much. It's, if we're looking at the fight or flight response, it would be the fawn response. And it shows up a lot in the children who felt they had to become invisible to avoid being a target. I'm so sorry if you were one of those. Those wounds, they stay with you until you nurture them yourself. And it also shows up as the person who says yes when every fiber in them says no, or screams no sometimes. And it shows up as this person who learns to soften, submit, and collapse in the hope that yielding will keep the peace, or keep you loved, or keep you from harm. It's those relationships or interactions where you don't want to be there and you still sink inward and surrender to the other person's control. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And this kind of surrender, it's not weakness. I want to make that very, very clear, because I can feel it. Anyone who's hearing this and it's resonating, I can feel the shame coming. It is not weakness. It's actually an incredibly brilliant behavioral adaptation. It is your nervous system doing whatever it takes to survive what should never have had to be survived, whether it was abuse or trauma or chaos or, unfortunately, the vast majority of people have never learned proper emotional regulation. So living with or experiencing or being in relationship with someone whose emotions are all over the place. And I speak as someone who once was that person, and I worked very hard to regulate. But that, being around that, it's exhausting. And being that person is exhausting. And all of this requires a tremendous amount of compassion. And the problem is that what kept us safe, that automatic surrender, that default mode, it now, as an adult, it keeps you small, and it keeps you in this echo chamber of the past where you yield, where you go silent, where you disappear at the first signs of conflict. And I'll tell you what, you're a grown-ass adult. It is not necessary anymore. You make your decisions. So be the adult who heals the patterns, not the child who lives in them. And when you are able to recognize that relief, that expansion after you let go of something you can't control, it really feels like, it feels like 500 pounds off your shoulders. And if you just heard me take that exhale, I started smiling because it feels like this exhale in your body, like your breath just deepened and your muscles can unclench just a little bit. And trust, this one, there's another intricacy to it, is the part of it that is about trust. Trust is not necessarily the outcome. It is learning to trust your own resilience and your ability to handle life's unfolding, whatever it may be. And being able to get to a place of emotional neutrality which also really becomes peace, then you're not gripped by anxiety or resistance about what happens next. And I want everyone to feel this. I finally found this state of inner peace. And I've said to people, I will defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, because it feels like liberation. It feels amazing because it's this lightness, this, I don't know, the moods are not weighed down. The situations don't feel hard. I feel buoyant. And I don't know, it's light. I feel light and airy and fluffy. And it is just recognizing, I've been calling it the Jesus take the wheel moments. Like when you get hit with one thing after another, when you're constantly exerting force against situations or people or experiences or relationships, and you just realize how taxing it is, and just throw your hands up and say, okay, I'm going into a flow state. Things start to unfold and it is beautiful. And this reminds me, I just was having a conversation with a friend recently, and she was really frustrated. And Angela, if you hear this, this is about you. Really frustrated about a delivery that was supposed to come and needed a signature, and FedEx had bumped it a day. And as she's in that stress state, I'm trying to order this cat door that I was having put into my to-go so the cats could be down in the basement, like litter boxes and everything. And I had a friend coming to put it in for me, and I'm trying to order it on the app, and it just kept saying error, error. So I'm getting frustrated. And then I realized we both were in this state of exerting control over things that we couldn't control. And I realized it, and I said, okay, stop, hang on. Let's take a breath together. We're just going to like, in through your nose, out through your mouth, and just pause. And we're going to go into a flow state. Everything will work out. It always works out. So I'm not joking. She and I stood there in her place of business, taking a deep breath and being like, it always works out. And I shit you not, within like a minute, there was a knock at the door, and it was FedEx, and they'd showed up. And I looked down at my phone, and my order had gone through. And I looked at her, and I just started laughing, and I was like, boom, flow state. It works beautifully. I highly recommend it. So getting back to healthy surrender, that was an example of healthy surrender, realizing I can't make the app process. She couldn't make FedEx show up. It's letting the things that you can't do something about, just throw your hands up and know that you can problem solve it. It is releasing relationships that are not working instead of fighting to change the other person or change the dynamic, because that's just who they are. And you kind of gently let it go and accept that it is what it is. It's trusting in the process. Like if you have a really difficult transition, like a new job or moving, hey, I just moved, and grief, or micromanaging every detail, and just open to the unknown and be willing to adapt as things change. That is surrender. I literally just experienced that and had the least stressful move I've ever had, even though it was chaos and it was snowstorms the entire time. And I am so thankful I had people that jumped in and helped. And I got a lot of weightlifting by moving a lot of stuff, but it's done and I'm here. And it was liberating. And other ways that it shows up is cry if you need to. Allow emotions to move through you rather than suppressing them or controlling them. And trust that feeling deeply is not going to break you. Feelings are guideposts. They are signs that are just letting you know that there is something going on here. And the more that you try to shove them down, the more they are going to roar back up. So go to the rage room, go smash some stuff. If you don't have a rage room, look and find one. It also, surrender also, well, that whole balance was surrendering control. Delegate some tasks at work, at home, and trust others to contribute, even if and especially if they do it differently than you. That's okay, because you need to learn to let others take care of you. I've learned this. It's also amazing. Saying things like, I don't know, or I need help, admitting your limits, letting others or the universe meet you there. And here's the biggest part: let go of self-judgment. Accept yourself as you are in this moment with compassion, instead of forcing yourself to be like, quote unquote, or better right now. And both both control and surrender, I was trying to say shadow work, have their shadows and things to think about. The one who compulsively fears vulnerability builds walls. And also with that, the one who compulsively controls their vulnerability builds walls. The one who compulsively surrenders avoids their own agency. They float untethered, unrooted, adrift. And both patterns are invitations to look within. So control is asking you to question, what am I so afraid of feeling or losing? And that can be a hard one. But be honest with yourself. And surrender is asking you to question, what part of me believes I can't shape my own life? Because that's what it comes down to. If you're controlling every aspect of your life, why do you believe, or where did that belief come from, that you lack the free will to handle anything, to make it what you want it to be? And think about this, as I've said already, deep beneath both of these, there is almost always a child who is longing for safety, for trust, for a world that won't collapse if they stop holding on so tightly. And for anyone who didn't get it, that reference to the child was you as a child. I had one person that I've talked to about that, and they were like, oh, I have kids. No, I'm not. I mean, yes, but no. So physical things, control, tightly clenching your fists around your steering wheel. And surrender is your hand opening up, palm up in the dark, not because it's easy, but because holding on is exhausting and you're ready to risk a new way. And again, as with all of the dualities, it does not mean picking one and exiling the other. It means knowing when to hold on and when to let go, when to steer and when to be carried, and when to act and when to trust. And just a reminder, your power is not in total control and your freedom is not in total surrender. It is this dance with both of them and learning their lessons and noticing what parts of your story each side brings up for you. Control and surrender are not about other people. They are not about situations. They are about you and why you feel you need to control, why you feel you need to surrender. Or not on either side. So this week, get curious. Notice where you're holding on really tight. Notice where you soften. No shame, no judgment, no guilt trips. I will ask that you let the portal stay open. And remember that the work is not to fix the duality, but to let it teach you about who you are and who you're becoming. So thank you as always for stepping into this paradox with me, and I will see you in the next deep dive tomorrow when we are exploring intentional versus autopilot. And I'm very excited about that one because if I haven't already said it, my words for 2026 are discernment and intentionality. Just a side note, 2025 was authenticity and accountability. I have 2 words for every year. So this one, I'll be back tomorrow. This is a longer episode. Sorry, not sorry, because it's an important one. So drop a comment, send me an email. I would love to hear some stories of where you've exerted too much control or where you've released into surrender. Thank you. Bye.